The Rangers got swept by the Phillies. They blew leads in all 3 games, and somehow that still wasn't even the worst news of the week. We're going to talk about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into just a truly dreadful week of Rangers baseball, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now, we headed into this week with a series against the Phillies. The Rangers in a rough way offensively, and this week they were not just in a rough way offensively, but defensively, and the pitching staff, and just everything was bad. Everything. Corey Seager hit well. That's it. That's the end of the highlights of the good things that happened for the Rangers this week. There's not a whole lot of bright-siding it, sugarcoating it, looking on the glass half full. I mean, if you want to, normally I will do that, but with a week so utterly and truly tragic, it feels like there's just not a whole lot of happiness and sunshine pumping that deserves to be pumped. But if you want to look the bright side, really the only bright side from the series is that the Phillies are really freaking good. They just are. They are, I would say, after this series. I thought so maybe before. I did a crossover with Connor Thomas heading into this series. Thought the Phillies had the best record in baseball, but I thought, I don't know. They hadn't played a whole lot of great teams so far this year, a whole lot of teams with winning records. And, well, after the whooping that they put on the Rangers cumulatively this week, the Rangers are 3 games below 500. First time ever in Bruce Bochy's tenure over the Texas Rangers. They have a losing record, and they are losing in spades. They scored first in every single game in this series, and in every single game, the Rangers gave up that lead, usually pretty quickly, usually by the next inning or the second inning. They scored in the first inning the first 2 games. They scored in the second inning of the second 2 games of this series, and the latest that it took the Phillies to retake the lead was the 4th inning. This whole series, that was the latest it took for them to retake the lead. 4th inning. That was the final game of this series. The starting pitching has been incredibly hurt. We already knew heading into the season you'd be without Scherzer and Mahle and DeGrom for half, if not most, of the season. And then were given some false optimism about, hey, maybe Max Scherzer, he's not placed from the 60 AL. Maybe he's coming back. Oh, nope, there's a setback. And then there's a whole new thing. Thankfully, there's been no setbacks with Mahle or DeGrom, at least at this point. I'm just, with how awful things have been feeling, I'm just bracing myself for some inevitability of that happening. I'm hoping I'm wrong. It's not anything logical as opposed to just the overwhelming dread of all pitchers are apparently going to be hurt. But the offense has just been, frankly, awful. This whole week, the whole last 2 weeks, it's not hitting with runners in scoring position. They're getting home runs occasionally, but they're almost all solo home runs. Seager had a couple of home runs in this series. Luis Taveras had a homer. Adolis Garcia had a homer in this series, but all solo home runs. Absolutely nothing when it came to runners in scoring position. And the thing that was really frustrating, that it feels like this team is actually starting to let all of this bad play get to them, is the defensive sloppiness. Just the absolute slop fest of defense that we did not see from this team last year. Last year, in year 1 under Bruce Bochy, this is one of not the best defensive teams in all of baseball. Infield defense, spectacular. Outfield defense, spectacular. Defense by the pitchers, significantly better than what it was the year before. And, of course, you got Jonah Heim behind the dish, who has always been exceptional defensively. That has never wavered. His offensive output, well, that's wavered at times, including this year. It's definitely gone up and down. But defensive, when you start to make, this many errors, especially in the 4-error game and the 11-4 loss that could have been a lot closer. I mean, it could have been a lot closer. Only 5 of those runs were earned by Rangers pitchers of the 11. The defense just did not do the pitchers any favors. I know Jonathan Hernandez let up 3 runs, but it's a lot of that was not his fault. He did get in trouble a little bit with the walks, but he struck out 4 in 2 1/3 innings of work. Dane Dunning was okay to start out, worked around some trouble, but then just could not quite get out of it. He was finally off the IL after his 15 days were up. So thankfully they got one starter back, but immediately another one goes down. Jon Gray leaves the game early. And of course, he is landed on the 15-day IL. We'll talk about that a little bit in the second segment, but it's just everything adding up for this team. I mean, this team is only 3 games below 500. With how rough it's been the last 3 weeks, it feels like a bazillion games below 500, especially with the talent level on this team. I mean, the starting pitching, after having 18,000 injuries to the starting pitching and some injuries to the bullpen as well, really just Josh Sborz, who has been more important to this team than I think they anticipated he would be, or his loss has been felt more prominently than I think they were hoping. They were hoping they could sustain, what will end up being at least 30 days worth of missed time from Josh Sborz, and it's affected them. The B side of this bullpen it's had its moments and it's had its struggles as well. I mean, the B side of this bullpen wasn't horrible this week. It was more the starting pitching that was finally faltering, which, kind of felt like an inevitability when you have 6 starters on the IL. Now 7 starters will have spent time on the IL. And who knows if Andrew Heaney is going to end up spending time on the IL at some point this season. Thankfully he hasn't, but his last 2 starts have been bad. Not what he wanted. Dane Dunning's first start off the IL, not what he wanted either. And Jon Gray, who's been your best pitcher this season, landing on the IL, that is quite literally the last thing that this team needed. We'll see when Eovaldi is actually going to come back. Hopefully it's soon. The thought heading into this series with the Phillies is, okay, well, you've survived having 6 starters on the IL for about a week and a half, and you still have, at that point, you had 4 guys in the rotation. You had a lot of off days coming up. You still do. So you can weather having just a 4-man rotation and still having some of those off days, using them as off days to get the few guys that are still healthy some extra time. But it was rough. Everything is just coming together in the exact worst way for this Rangers team right now. They just look frankly lost at times at the plate, and you look up and down this lineup, and really outside of Semien and Seager, almost everybody else has been an offensive liability for the last 2 weeks. It's just been so incredibly tough to watch. We've seen some flashes from Adolis Garcia. He's always been a streaky hitter. He always will be. But his hot streaks are usually prolonged. At least they were last year. The cold streaks have been shorter as of late. But when you look up and down, and Leote's slumping, and Evans slumping, and Josh Smith is slumping, and Nathaniel Lowe is slumping, and Jonah Heim is slumping, and you've got Josh Young on the IL and Wyatt Langford on the IL. It's just, there's only so much. Even a great team with a lot of depth and a lot of strength of character and mental stability and belief in itself as a concept and in each other, there's only so much that even the best teams can suffer and still succeed. Now, I'm not by any means saying that the season's lost, the Rangers are going to tank and everything's going in the crapper. That's not it. It's been a rough couple of weeks. But again, it is just a rough couple of weeks. But it's worth looking at how much rougher it might get in the near future with Jon Gray landing on the injured list and some other moves that had to be made. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite sports games, events, music, comedy, theater, it can be tough. But with Game Time, they are here to make it so much easier for you. Game Time is the best way to get tickets to any kind of event you're looking for, whether it's sports, music, comedy, theater, any event near you. Game Time is the best place to get those tickets. They've got last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They've also got flash deals with even more exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. They've also got an all-in pricing. You can toggle this feature. It'll show you the total upfront. No surprise fees at checkout. That's exactly what I want. Just be honest with me. How much are these tickets going to cost? Game Time will not hide that from you. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. If you are feeling bullish on the Rangers winning the 2024 World Series going back-to-back, then Lord bless you. They still got some decent odds despite this incredibly rough couple of weeks stretch. They've got worse odds than the Astros by a lot, even though they still have a better record than the Astros, which is quite frustrating. The Astros are plus 1,300, sixth best odds. Rangers are plus 1,800, tied with the Mariners, who are also plus 1,800, the seventh best odds to win the 2024 World Series. Or you're thinking, you know what, I don't want to bet on those Rangers. I want to bet on my Mavericks. They've got all kinds of different odds for tonight. Mavs at Timberwolves, Mike Conley to score 10-plus points, Karl-Anthony Towns to score 15-plus, Kyrie 20-plus, Luka 25-plus, Anthony Edwards 30+ points. They've got all kinds of different wagers there. So go check it out at FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Now, the Rangers have had just so many injuries and so many transactions, so many roster moves in the month of May. I made a joke earlier this month that it would be a miracle if the Rangers went 3 days without making some kind of transaction. And, well, they did have a stretch there. A 4-day stretch where the Rangers didn't make any transactions. It was very short-lived, but from the 16th of May to the 20th of May, there were no moves. The 16th of May was when the Rangers put Brock Burke on signed Brock Burke on a rehab assignment to the Arizona Complex League. And the 20th was when they optioned Davis Wenzel. But the Rangers have just made transaction after transaction after transaction. And it's not like they're signing a bunch of guys. Granted, some of those have been signing guys to minor league deals. But the vast majority of them have been either optioning guys down because they're doing poorly, or putting guys on the IL, or moving guys from the 15-day or the 10-day IL to the 60-day IL. The Rangers have made 36 transactions as we are here today on June 24th. Now, it's a little misleading, maybe. It's just in the month of May, 36 transactions. But most of those, some of those have just been signings, and there's just been minor league signings, and there's no corresponding move. And but some of those have been that. Not most of them. Most of them have been the injury moves, the optioning. There is a corresponding move. So even if you cut those in half, it's 18 transactions, if you want to label it as that. And that's still very close to one a day. It's just been constant. The most recent ones that I feel are the most noteworthy, not only activating Dane Dunning off the IL. That's huge. That's incredibly helpful. The Rangers needed that to be just a 15-day stint for Dane Dunning, because anything more than that, and I fear for the mental health and stability of Rangers fans everywhere of what that would be. But the Rangers purchased the contract of Jesus Tinoco to bring him up after the Rangers put Jon Gray on the 15-day IL with a right groin strain. They also moved Cody Bradford from the 15-day IL to the 60-day IL. I went back and looked this up to see exactly when Cody Bradford would be back, because that felt like a significant sign, even though he'd been out for a while and he recently got shut down because it just wasn't getting better. It's not just a lower back strain. I don't know why they're still listing that as a lower back strain when it is, in fact, a cracked rib. Why the Rangers are listing it as such on their official transaction website, I don't particularly know. Maybe that's just because it was what he was placed on the IL for initially. But Bradford's not going to be back until at the earliest June 13th. And with how little we've known, how little progress there's been, how much there's just been setbacks and no good news about Cody Bradford, who there was nothing but good news for his first 3 starts. I feel like that's going to get lost in the shuffle of all the massive injuries, of the setbacks with Scherzer. That's obviously, I'd say, a bigger deal in general than Cody Bradford's, at least a bigger story. The rehab of Jacob deGrom is a more impactful story. Same with Malley. But after those 3 great starts, I was like, okay, let's see. We're about to figure out, is Cody Bradford a reliable, at least back-end starting pitcher? And I thought he was about to establish himself as such. And then, boom, here comes a fractured rib that disguised itself as a lower back strain, and that's rough. And Jon Gray on the 15-day IL with a right groin strain, which the Rangers did an MRI the day after he left his start after 75 pitches. Gray said he was confident that he wouldn't miss a start, and, well, he is going to miss at least 2 of his starts because he's on the 15-day IL, and that's how that works based on just math. And so this is just literally the last thing the Rangers needed. They're saying that hopefully it doesn't seem as big of a strain as what Nate Eovaldi had been dealing with. Eovaldi is quote-unquote close to returning, which I'm hoping means this weekend at some point we will see Nathan Eovaldi, the Rangers' de facto ace now, back on the hill, who pitched like an ace for the first half, or the first 7 starts of the season before he went on the IL with that right groin strain himself. The Rangers need him back, and they need him back in a big way. They're leaning at this point, it seems like, reading between the tea leaf lines, as I have been, that he is not going to make a rehab start because he just wants to come back as soon as possible, as soon as he's ready, not too soon. Because if he goes back on the IL as soon as he gets off, then I think you just go ahead and Control-Alt-Delete this season, treat it like 2014 and say, this was a crappy one, and everything that could possibly went wrong basically went wrong. And you flush and forget the entire year come Labor Day, which is not where the Rangers wanted to be. It's not where they should be, especially with the Astros also starting very rough and having a bazillion injuries, and the Mariners starting okay, but not great, not separating themselves, not distancing themselves like I thought they would be at this point with how far back the 2 teams in Texas have been. I thought the Mariners would be running away with this division, and they haven't been. The Rangers wanted to win the AL West this year because that did legitimately stick in their craw, the losing it on the last day, the Alex Bregman comment. They remembered that, and they got the last laugh, but they wanted to have the first laugh and the last laugh this year, win the AL West, and also eliminate the Astros, and hopefully not lose 3 games of a 7-game series, and lose all 3 home games of a 7-game series to the Astros next time they play them in the playoffs. Hopefully they just win all of them. That was the goal. But at this point, they are not on pace to be a playoff team. And if they keep having these injuries, there's not anywhere left really to turn to. Cueto is finally throwing games in actual minors, not just in the Arizona Complex League. He's still getting built back up, but if you're dipping into calling him up, at this point, he's going to be an option over Jack Leiter, because Leiter showed he's just not ready yet, and that's fine. But not having Leiter ready, not having Owen White ready, not being able to get starts out of Cody Bradford, who was projected to be like the 6th man in this rotation heading out of camp, even with all those guys, those 3 big guys on the IL. It's just, a hat tip to Jon Gray for what he had done so far this season, to Eovaldi for what he had done so far this season. The 3 starts from Bradford and that middle stretch there by Heaney, and the decent starts that they've gotten from Lorenzen, who's been not overwhelmingly great, but huge, just having another body in there. I mean, the fact that they have Treadwater like this, with the most of the offense being mid to bad for the whole year, despite it being pretty much the same offense, save for Josh Young and Mitch Garver. It's that same offense that went nuclear for like 4 months out of the year, or the regular season last year, and then a whole month in the playoffs did enough to win the dang World Series, and it just hasn't been the same. And somehow this team is not really in it, but not quite out of it, which is where you were hoping you'd be. But also, it just feels like they've gotten there in such a weird way that it feels much more defeating than it should at this point. I'm going to look at some kind of way to make the most of enjoying this crappy season so far, and just some kind of a bright spin on what has been a truly terrible week for Rangers baseball. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. It is so easy, so fun to get in on the action. All you do is pick more or less on your favorite stat categories. They've got all kinds of different games, different leagues. They've got MLB, they've got NBA, they've got WNBA, NHL, PGA, soccer, all kinds of different leagues. Let's just look at the NBA for tonight. You got plus or minus more or less 6 rebounds for Daniel Gafford. I'm feeling like a little bit more than 6 rebounds. Or Jaden McDaniels, they have over more or less than 12.5 points. I feel like he's probably going to have a little bit less. Let's see. We got Luka Doncic points, 29. More or less. I'm feeling more than 29 points from Luka. It is that easy to go pick your favorite stats, your favorite players. Get in on the action in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Now, it is hard to sugarcoat and brightside what has been a truly stinky week of Texas Rangers baseball. It hasn't been the worst week of Texas Rangers baseball that I've ever watched. That definitely happened, I'd say, sometime in 2021 in the back half of that season. So it's not even the stinkiest week of Rangers baseball that I've podcasted about, because I've been doing this podcast since 2019, and boy howdy, have there been some stinky weeks in between now and then. And I apologize for missing my show yesterday. There's only going to be 4 shows this week. Started a new job on Tuesday, and it has been great and fun, but exhausting, very intense training. So just the brain power and energy to do 5 shows, it wasn't quite there. But hopefully moving forward, still be 5 shows a week, still be giving it to you at the regular times. But I would appreciate any and all patience with me moving forward, and maybe some patience with this Rangers team, because, well, flags do fly forever. And it was less than 7 months ago that the Texas Rangers did a thing that I'd say most of us lifelong Rangers fans thought would never, ever happen. It seemed like something that was beyond this franchise's capability. Winning a title, just, if it wasn't going to happen in 2011, and it wasn't going to happen in 2010, and with the way things fell apart in 2012, in 2015, in 2016, even with all the new bells and whistles of the Corey Seager and the Marcus Semien and signing Jacob deGrom, making a trade for Max Scherzer, and you have Nate Eovaldi, and you have Bruce Bochy and Chris Young, and everything's different in 2023. And we thought, okay, maybe things are different. And then they rattle off that amazing start to the postseason, that undefeated run through the first couple of rounds. Then they win the first 2 against the Astros in Houston. You think, oh my gosh, everything's going to be gravy. Everything's different. This team's never going to lose ever again. Then they lose 3 straight. Then they come back in games 6 and 7 in Houston to take that series in the most dramatic way possible, because, of course, this franchise only does things in dramatic ways. Then they nearly lose game 1 of the World Series against a team they should have beaten. And they go and they win the most iconic game in franchise history. Maybe the best game of baseball that anyone's ever played in the history of the world. I'd say pretty comfortably, yes. And they lose game 2. And then they just rattle off 3 more straight road wins, win the World Series. And I don't know about you, but on November 1st and 2nd and 3rd, 4th, 5th, all of November, December, January, February, through March of this year, I thought, Texas Rangers baseball is never going to make me sad again, because they made me so incredibly happy last November. And I had some friends tell me who had watched their baseball team win it all for the first time ever, after thinking they were cursed forever and would never win it, a.k.a. Sully, the Great, who was a Red Sox fan. Remember what 2004 was like. They said, yeah, it's pretty great for a while. Same with my friend Sarah, who's a Cubs fan. Said, yeah, it's pretty great for a while. But your team's going to piss you off again. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen a little quicker than you expected. Especially this year. You head in, I mean, you knew you had Scherzer out for a while. You knew you had DeGrom, Malley out for a while. You knew you had Nathaniel Lowe out for the start of the season, and Corey Seager wasn't quite his full Corey Seager self. Even when Josh Young went on the IL, which was heartbreaking and sucked, and I hated it. And Wyatt Langford and Evan Carter weren't quite great starting off. You thought, that's okay. This team's still hovering around 500. And then you get swept by the Rockies. You think, okay, well, that series sucked. But then they'll turn things around. That was just a weird series. The Rockies, even the bad teams get on good runs. And that's what happened with the Rockies that won series. And you dropped 2 out of 3 Cleveland. Okay, Cleveland's good. Get right series against the Angels. Okay, you dropped 2 out of 3 there. That stinks. Okay, now you head to Philly. Surely you can take 1. Nope. You can't take 1. And here this team is, 3 games under 500, feeling like the world's on fire, everything is crashing down, nothing will ever be good again. That's just categorically untrue. The sun will shine again on the Texas Rangers. Maybe this year is going to be an absolute stinker. Maybe it's going to end up like 2014, and just the sheer overwhelming amount and duration of injuries will derail this team. The insane amount and duration of starting pitching injuries that they've already faced, not only having 3 great pitchers on the IL for half the season, if not more, to start the year going in, but having Eovaldi and Gray and Bradford and Dunning all spend time on the IL. And also, it took a few weeks to get Michael Lorenzen into this rotation, who was just kind of an afterthought. And they're still surviving. It's honestly a miracle that they are where they are right now. But because that starting pitching has held up, and you've got greatness out of Urania, and you've got goodness out of Lorenzen, and you've got capability out of Dunning and Heaney, and the offense, which wasn't supposed to be the problem at all. This was supposed to be an unbeatable offense that could do no wrong. And then also, you had a full season of Evan Carter, who was amazing for 2 months. You had a full season of Wyatt Langford, who is the highest hyped rookie prospect the Rangers have had in forever. In absolutely forever. And neither of them quite live up to the billing just yet. And you think, okay, this is how this team is deciding to stink it up? This is how this team is losing games? It's not the bullpen, which we weren't quite sure. It's not the back end of this bullpen, because Kirby Yates is just peak Kirby Yates again. David Robertson is as good as you could have ever possibly asked him to be. Pico has been inconsistent, which, we kind of knew about Jose Leclerc. God love him. World Series champion forever. Josh Boers has been hurt, which, again, happened quite a bit last year. And just the way that they've gotten to where they are and getting 3 at times promising moments from Jack Leiter, but overall bad results. It's just an incredibly frustrating way to be where they are, and just taking that step back, taking that deep breath, and remembering, okay, well, this does suck. But this team had plenty of worse stretches last year. Plenty of more confusing, frustrating, hopeless moments last year. And they did pull themselves out of it. You remember how hopeless things felt after that regular season sweep at home against the Astros in September? The Rangers didn't have that much time to make up ground and figure things out. And it felt like everything was done. They were a year ahead of schedule. Okay, that season's lost. And they ended up winning the gosh darn World Series that year. You remember that 8-game losing streak? Felt like 30 games the end of August, after everything was amazing for the beginning of August. Rangers had an 8-game winning streak. Maybe it was 10. I can't even remember. It's so much has happened in the last 6 months since then, or 8, however many freaking months it is. I'm not good at math or time or knowing when things are. But I do know right now it is still very early. Good friend Sully over at Locked On MLB always says, never check the standings until Memorial Day. Well, if the Rangers, after Memorial Day, not on Memorial Day. So the Rangers have 3 more games. If they get back to 500, if they're within a couple of games of the Mariners, when you're allowed to look at the standings legally by Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, that's where they are on Tuesday, is at 500. They would need a sweep, or even just 1 game, 2 games below 500. And then I'd say they're all right, especially if this offense just figures out how to hit again. Please just do that this weekend against what is unfortunately a very, very good pitching staff in the Twins. And their starting pitching has been fantastic. Their bullpen's been pretty good the last couple of years. Starting pitching isn't as elite as it was last year, but this is a team that was just quite recently battered by the Yankees. And unfortunately, this offense has not been as good as the Yankees' offense. I thought it would be, but so far it very much hasn't been. But it's still in there. It's not like these guys just have no capability of figuring things out. Jonah Heim is an all-star. Daniel Lowe won a Silver Slugger. Josh Smith is a good player. Evan Carter is a very good player. Adolis Garcia is a great player. And they've got the potential to figure some things out and hit much, much better than they have. It's been a rough start. It was a crappy week. But hey, better a crappy week than a crappy year or month or life of a franchise. That's not what this team is anymore. They are still the reigning World Series champs. And even if they stink it up this year and lose 100 games, we will always be able to go back, look at those highlights of those Corey Seager home runs, of the walk-off home run in Game 1, of those 18 bazillion home runs that Adolis Garcia hit against the stinking Houston Astros. And I don't know about you, but those are always going to make me smile, no matter how crappy this current Rangers team happens to be playing. That's going to do it for this week's shows. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.